Hey folks, welcome to another ND add-on tutorial. So in this one, we're going to have a look at all the different Booleans that you can use in ND. So by default, if you don't have anything selected and you try and click on one of these Booleans, you notice A, they're grayed out, but two, you cannot actually click on them to do anything. So the reason for this is that for a Boolean to actually work, you need two objects selected. Basically, the way it works is you have one object that is the reference or the cutting object, and then you have your target object. Now, the target object is the one that will have the final modifications applied to it, and it's the one that is what you're left with at the end of the day. So, in order for ND to know which one is the target and which one is the reference when you perform the operation, the order in which you select them is important. And the way we do that is basically by starting off by selecting, first of all, the reference object and then selecting the target, right? So, what I mean by that is you select your reference and then hold down the shift key and then click on your target. So, you'll have two objects selected. And then in the Blender 3D view, your active object will be used as the target. So with those two objects selected, you can then open up the ND shortcut menu, go down to Booleans, and you can see now all of these operations are available. All right, so let's start with the first one. So the first one we can see here is called difference. So if we select difference, you'll notice a couple of things happen. So first of all, the target object has had, this sort of cube shape cut out of it. And that's basically the difference between the reference object and the target object. Now, a few other things have happened as well. For starters, the reference object has been put into wireframe mode. And this is because it's purely now acting as just a Boolean cutter, and it makes it more obvious to you as a user that, okay, this is just a Boolean cutter, and the actual final geometry is still the visible geometry in the scene. We also parent the reference or the cutting object to the target. So if you wanted to grab the target object and move that around, your existing Booleans won't break. The other thing that happens as well is on the reference object, if we go into the scene hierarchy here and have a look under the cube at the parented child object here, which is this reference object, you'll notice that the name has been prefixed with bool. And we've just done that so that, you as a user, when you're looking at the scene view here, you can see, which objects are Boolean cutters versus which objects are just sort of your standard geometry. Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept, but what happens is, the active object gets a Boolean modifier applied to it. Because we chose difference, it's automatically set to difference mode, and the reference object is set up for us. So it just makes that whole process a little bit less tedious. And actually, before I forget, one other thing that happens on the reference object is we also turn off rendering. So if you were to render the scene out, you wouldn't see the reference object, which is 9 times out of 10 what you want to happen. So just keep in mind that is there. So if you do suddenly want to see it in your render, just make sure you turn this back on. Cool. So I'm just going to jump back a few steps, just undo and undo all the way back, just to go back to where we started. All right, so the next one down in the list is union. So we'll click on union. Now, it probably doesn't look like anything happened at first, but if we pay careful attention, we can see we have our reference object here sort of in wireframe mode over the top of what looks like the original reference cube. But if we just hide the reference wireframe object, what we're left with is this final object, which is basically the two cubes welded together or, unioned. So these things now act as a single mesh. So if we, for instance, apply a bevel to this, you can see how the bevel is applying to this entire object as if it was just one, solidified, welded, unioned object. So that's pretty cool. Nothing more to say about that one. That's just what the union operator does. Next one down is intersect. So intersect is interesting. It's basically, I guess, the inverted version of difference. So whereas in difference, this inner cube would have been cut away from the target object and you were left with what remains. Intersect gives you only the part that intersects between the two objects. So instead of seeing the remaining cube left in the scene, it sort of gets deleted and you're just left with the part that is intersecting. But other than that, I mean, the reference object and all the other, behavior still is in place. So parenting, wireframe mode, disable and renders, and all that. It's just you just left with basically the part that is intersecting. All right, let's jump back again. And the last one is sort of interesting as well. So slice is not something that is built into Blender by default. So if we select slice here, we can see we still have our reference object in wireframe mode, but what it looks like it's done is almost laser cut the target object. So what you have is the reference object taking its profile and almost slicing it out of the target object. Now, it's not doing anything too crazy under the hood. All it's really doing is taking your target object and duplicating it and applying on one of those duplicates a difference Boolean, and on the second one an intersect Boolean operation, and then just leaving both of them in the scene. So if we hide the reference, for instance, we can see we have one cube here, which was the intersection between the reference and the active or the target cube, and then we have the remainder, which is the difference. This is pretty cool. I mean, this is a really quick and easy way to cut out like panels and add extra details to objects as well, because, with that in place, you could, for instance, run a weighted normal bevel, maybe set this up to about 20 and select this other cube and do the same. Let's set this to about 20 as well. And you can see we've cut out sort of a panel line there quite easily. And again, it's completely non-destructive. So if we were to unhide the reference object, select it, and move it around, we can change, where this this panel, where this slice has occurred. Yeah, cool. I mean, that's all there is to it. So those are the 4 booleans that we support at the moment, and there may be ones, new ones coming out in the future when we come up with different ways of using booleans in Blender. But that's all there is for boolean at the moment. So yep, enjoy and have fun.